So, stress. Stress gets a pretty bad rap in the book, and it gets a pretty bad rap generally. But I sort of want to broaden our idea of stress in this video, even though I'll also cover the content that is covered in the book. And so the book is this definition of stress, which is that it's an adverse reaction people have to excessive pressure placed on them from different demands. And we'll go into what some of those demands might be and how it's particularly relevant in the workplace and the effects of stress in the workplace as well. But I want to sort of frame this up as well as kind of getting you to get your head around the idea of this term called eustress. So eustress is the idea of beneficial or positive stress. As well as that, getting your heads around the idea that stress kind of sits on this continuum. And generally, when we're talking about stress, we're talking about the idea of having too much stress, but just as kind of undesirable is having too little stress. And so I'm sure you've all had that experience of where you're bored. I'm sure you're dealing with it right now in COVID, where there's just actually not enough going on that is kind of giving you that little bit of pressure that is really useful and helpful. And so as students, ideally, you should be sitting in this kind of happy medium of eustress most of the time. Now, we know that there'll be periods where you'll have periods of like where deadlines are coming up. You might have exams coming up. These things might put you into a state of stress, which is defined as too stressed because you've got too much going on and a lot of pressure. But generally speaking, if we don't give you enough work to do, the whole process of learning should be a process of eustress, because that's the point of it, is that learning is about growth. And so you need to be striving in that process. So if you think of it like, learning how to run or learning anything, so learning how to drive a car, at first it will be quite stressful because you'll be dealing with something new. You won't know how to do it. So your attention, your ability to master the skill is quite low. And so there's a bit of stress that sits there. But if you never get into the car, you'll be sitting down at this level of too little stress, which means that you won't be actually able to improve. So I just wanted to frame that up, because we then get into really looking at this level of having too much stress and the factors that contribute to that. But I'll also put into our lecture series a really good TED talk that looks at some of the upsides of stress that can help us really focus and think about, are we actually just in a state of eustress or are we actually in a state of stress? So when we're thinking about this too much stress, so excessive stress, these are some of our different symptoms. I'll let you kind of have a bit of a look at them, but we can think of them in three categories. So we have our physical symptoms. So, you might have experienced some of these when you're feeling pretty stressed. And so we can use these as diagnosis tools as well. So if we're getting all these kind of symptoms, is it a symptom of stress that is showing us that we are in an excessive stress state? We have psychological features or symptoms. So again, we can see some of these down here are symptoms of too little stress, so not being in a eustress state. But if we get up to the high stress, we'll also be getting these sort of symptoms as well. And then there'll be changes in behavior. So as managers, these are probably going to be the ones that are going to be most visible to us. And so they can be cues to us as managers that our teams, our team members are experiencing stress. It may be harder for us to observe some of these other ones in terms of the physical and psychological. So having the relationship with our staff members will help us be able to understand these things and be able to kind of diagnose them. But the other thing that's important to remember is that these symptoms they're not only the symptoms of stress. So we don't want to be over-diagnosing people or attributing or doing false attribution. But if we want to be good managers, we need to be aware that stress may be a part of the complexity of the people that we're working with, and being able to manage it and help people navigate it is important as well. So we have these 5 different categories of things that can contribute to people experiencing excessive stress. So we'll go through each of them briefly so that you can get your head around how they work, and then as managers, how they might play a role and how you can help mitigate each of these different stresses. So the first one is what we call task demands. So these are the things that are just related to a person's job. And so it might be the actual features of the job and how it is designed. So autonomy is the degree to which people have a sense of choice and decision-making capacity around the job, that the work that they're doing and the task that they're doing. So if they're told you have to do it this way and this is the only way you can do it, then they have a low sense of autonomy. But if they are able to kind of choose the way that they actually go about doing the task, if they have a sense of ownership over that task, that will give them that sense of autonomy. Task variety. So we talked a little bit about this in our last module when we talked about organizational design, and that if people are doing the same thing over and over and over again, they'll tend to get bored. And that will lead to job dissatisfaction, and it can also lead to a sense of stress because their minds will kind of just start to go, this is too boring. And the degree of automation. So again, the repetitiveness, and if they kind of feel like they're part of a machine rather than a human being in control of what they're doing, this can contribute to a sense of stress. And it can also contribute to that lower level of apathy as well. So not enough stress in their role. Working conditions can create task demand stress. So this can work in with the physical work layout. So, you know, if things are very physically demanding, that can be quite stressful. If things are quite psychologically demanding in terms of the work conditions, if there's a lot of chaos, if there's heaps of change, if they aren't given enough resources to do the work that they need to do, these kinds of conditions can contribute to the actual task demand and make it hard for people to actually deliver the job that they're trying to do. Work quotas are things like, okay, you've got to produce this many widgets in per hour or per day. Again, you can imagine that would be quite stressful if you're just trying to pump stuff out and get too much done, and it's exceeding your ability to actually deliver on the job. There's stress that's attached to that. And then what we call interdependence between your tasks and the tasks of others, right? So if I can't do my job unless someone else has done their job, and they haven't done their job, then I'm going to feel stress because I'm going to be waiting for them, and I'm not going to feel that sense of autonomy and control around being able to do my tasks. And similarly, if other people are reliant on me and I feel like a bit of a bottleneck because I can't get the work out to them, that can create stress for me as well. Our second is what we call the role demands. So this is the way that the job is kind of conceptualized. And so we can have ambiguity around that. So if you're in a job and you're not clear what it is that you are expected to do, that's what's called role ambiguity. You're kind of sitting there going, am I meant to be doing this? Is this what I don't know. Is this what I'm here for? So that can cause stress for people because they're not clear on what is expected of them, and what they need to be doing. What we call role conflicts. So this is where we have expectations on us that are hard to actually meet and satisfy. So it could be that we're expected to manage all these people and deliver all this work at the same time, and the complexity attached to that, because we've got people at us all day going, I need this, I need this, I need this, means that we can't actually get to what is meant to be our job. Or we may have two bosses that are having different expectations and we can't work out which is more important, or get both of those things done. So the expectations around what our job is for and what we're expected to do is in conflict. And then role overload. So similar to what I just explained before, if we've got more work than we can actually accomplish in the scope of the role, there's too many kind of hats we have to wear or jobs we need to do within that role. That can be quite stressful as well. So then we have these 3 other stresses. So other people can be very stressful. You know, we may work with people who are unpleasant. Incivility is a growing area of research in the psychology space in workplaces, and it's a huge factor. So just people being nasty and rude actually really contributes to people's level of stress and their ability to actually perform at work. We also may just have people pressuring us, having other demands on us that is going to lead to stress. The structure of the organisation, so which we looked at earlier in this module, the way that the organisation is actually structured and organised may be a stressor for us. So if we've got a very hierarchical organisation where there's a lot of rules, we're not going to have a lot of autonomy in the work that we do. And so we might feel like we're kind of boxed in and just kind of have to do things in a certain way, and that those rules are limiting our ability to actually achieve what we need to achieve because we're hemmed in. And probably any of you have had work experience in the past have felt that sense of just being bound in by the rules of the organisation, and the frustration and stress that goes along with not being able to do what you think needs to be done. As well as being this lack of autonomy that is inherent in not being able to participate in decision makings. And so feeling like you have no say in what is going on and how you do your job can contribute to your kind of existential stress to some degree, as well as just your ability to feel like you are a human being who is respected and honoured in the organisation. And then the supervisory style that you encounter may also be quite stressful. So, you know, if you have a boss that is uncivil, you know, is rude and mean and or aggressive, that can be quite stressful. Similarly, if you have a supervisor who is very kind of hands off, that can be very stressful as well, because it can lead to things like role ambiguity, where you're kind of like, I've got no sense of direction. I don't actually know what I'm meant to be doing here. My boss doesn't give me any guidance or help. And so that can be very stressful for people as well. So being a manager that has that balance between being engaged but not sort of overbearing can be quite a complex space to navigate. As well as there's factors about individuals that can contribute to their level of stress. And so we talk about this idea of type A and type B personalities. Type A personalities being people who are very driven, very competitive, and so that tends to equate with a lot more stress, whereas type B personalities tend to be more relaxed and easygoing when it comes to change and getting things done. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily less productive, but it does mean that they're just they're not as kind of, this is what I'm doing and this is where I'm going and kind of get out of my way. They tend to be just a little bit more flexible and adaptable to change. And so our book offers us a couple of ideas around how stress can be reduced. I don't think they're particularly good examples, primarily because you will typically only find these options in very large corporate environments. And so if you're not in that environment, and this is also a very kind of externalized view of, you know, if you're stressed, here's some kind of band-aid solutions. What is much better is that we actually deal with the 5 factors that are actually contributing to stresses for people, and helping navigate and manage them. So, you know, things like resolving role conflicts and role ambiguities, trying to deal with task demands and things like this, so that the stress actually is reduced at the source rather than trying to be mitigated or managed at the end. And so again, I kind of, particularly for you becoming managers, I kind of also reiterate this thing that, you know, we're not just going to be sort of saying, oh, well, all stress is good, and being stressed is good. I would never say that. Some stress is important, but we do have this, what I would call the Goldilocks zone in the middle between, you know, we've got our porridge that's too cold or too hot or just right. We need to be dealing with a just right level of stress, but also recognizing that there will be times where we will feel overwhelmed and, you know, things will be stressful. But as long as that's only, it's manageable and it's only for short periods of time, it then becomes something that we can readily bounce back from.